Hello and welcome to Talking Royals, the weekly podcast from ITV News on all things royal and royal family. And there was really only one story this week, and it was the story that both Lizzie and I were at, which was in Poland for the commemorations of Auschwitz. I'm Chris Shipp, ITV's royal editor, and Lizzie Robinson, royal producer, is here as normal. Quite a poignant, sombre, sacred moment, wasn't it?
Yeah, sacred actually is the word that the King used several times during his visit to Poland for the 80th anniversary of the liberation of Auschwitz. And the King travelled to Poland. It was his first visit to Auschwitz, but also the first visit by a British monarch to Auschwitz, which I found surprising, actually. I thought particularly the King would have been, this was his fifth visit to Poland, and he's never been. But
we said last week we were surprised that he had not been before, particularly because he'd actually been to Krakow, which is it's the biggest town. If anyone goes to Auschwitz, they normally go to Krakow, and he'd been there twice before. Yeah,
this was his fifth visit to Poland, and actually he started the day at the Jewish Community Centre, didn't he? And that was a building that he was inspired to create back in 2002 when he visited Krakow, and he met a survivor then and realised that there needed to be a space for members of the Jewish community to be able to gather. And he went back in 2008, was reunited with that survivor in 2008, opened the building and was back there this week, gave a very poignant and moving speech, I thought, and also met Richard, the survivor that had inspired him in 2002 again.
Yeah, and I suppose that's one thing that we should be grateful for, and actually I think a lot of people made this point that actually for this 80th anniversary of the liberation of Auschwitz, it was on the 27th of January 1945 that Russian troops first discovered this camp and the horrors of what went on inside. But there are now inevitably just fewer and fewer Holocaust survivors. I think there were they didn't know quite how many because of how frail some of them are, 50 to 60 at the main service. But the King was able to meet two of them at the Jewish Community Centre, wasn't he? So.
Yeah, including Richard, who I mentioned there. He was very young. During the Holocaust, his entire family was wiped out by Nazis, and he was taken in by a Polish family, wasn't he? And hidden because he was Jewish, and they protected him and cared for him and looked after him.
Yeah, I was talking to him actually. I mean, in Polish through a translator, and he was telling me how nobody told the Nazis about this family, this Polish family that was looking after him. They would have been executed were they to have been found out for keeping a Jewish child from the Nazis. But, I asked him about the King going for the first time. And he's obviously, as you said, met the King a couple of times before. And he said, I think it's just really important. This is the King of Britain. Britain helped defeat the Nazis, and he is going to go to Auschwitz and see for himself with his own eyes what happened there. Now, look, I'd been before, and I described it coming out of there as in a stunned silence. We went again this time, didn't we? After the main commemoration service, we went the following day. Important to go, but a very, very difficult, that's an understatement, harrowing place to visit.
Yeah, I think the King, as we said, his first time there, I was on the royal rota with him on that engagement. And
so it was you, there was a TV cameraman, a couple of reporters from the papers, and you were with the King as he walked through those gates, the famous gates, Arbeit macht frei, work sets you free, the biggest lie in history pretty much for anyone who was in that camp.
And he looked visibly moved and very emotional, unsurprisingly, through that visit. He has done a lot of work with Holocaust survivors, but to actually go there and to walk through that path where the prisoners were kept, to walk into the block. He went to what's called Block 5, which is where they have all the displays of the personal items. There are just thousands and thousands of shoes, adult shoes, and then a cabinet of these tiny children's shoes, suitcases that belong to people with their names still written on them. I think, just the scale, the sheer scale,
it's really hard,
the
isn't
volume
it?
of it all.
People might have seen pictures of this before, and again, we tried to show it again on Monday, but it's really, really hard to convey just how many shoes there are there. And, these were shoes that were taken off those who'd arrived in camp, and then they had to walk barefoot to the gas chambers. It's just really hard. And again, this was just a tiny fraction, one imagines, of the shoes. The hair as well, that the other prisoners had to take off the hair of the women after they were killed in the gas chambers. There is so much to take in about the depths to which humanity sank in those years. It blows your mind, doesn't it, really?
Completely unfathomable. I can't really even put it into words what it feels like visiting and understanding and realising the horrors of what happened there. 1.1 million people, the majority of which were Jewish, lost their lives. And
that was just at Auschwitz.
Just at Auschwitz. It was...
The Holocaust was 6 million Jews, wasn't it?
But the scale of the site is just, it's vast. It's and there is this sort of almost haunting silence, isn't there, when
like a
you're
hush, isn't
there?
Because I always say a lot of school trips, and there were tourists there. You can even call them tourists. Let's call them visitors. And everyone is in a hushed silence. And often you get kids sort of playing around or making a noise, or a group of teenagers laughing. But no one is doing that, because everyone has that level of shock, which we saw on the King's face at the end when he was in that. They call it the reconstruction of the death wall, which is in between those two. Was it blocks 10 and 11, where those prisoners were taken out and shot? You could see it on the King's face, couldn't you? He just could not understand, how any of this was able to happen, and on such a scale. That's the other thing that kind of blows your mind, isn't it? The kind of machine that must have had to swing into place. Before we listen to the King, let's have a quick listen to the chief rabbi. I spoke to the chief rabbi at the Jewish Community Centre. And here's someone who's been to Auschwitz a number of times. But as he said, this, of course, we've told you this is the King's first visit there. But as he said, every single time he goes, he has to kind of try and process what he's just seen himself. And, we're talking here about someone who's confronted this a lot during his time. But this was the Britain's chief rabbi.
It takes me weeks to start to forget about what I had seen, and the images and the thoughts become internalized. And actually that's really important, because we have to remember the horrors of the past for the sake of the future.
That's how he deals with it. But I think, as he said, you have to make yourself do it so that you can remember, so that you hope that this can never happen again. And in a way, you kind of do feel that responsibility yourself when you go to Auschwitz, excuse me, that if you can tell one other person about it, then you are helping to keep that memory, the horror, alive, so that it might not happen again.
Yeah, the King, there was a message actually left from the King in the visitor's book that he then signed. And in that message, he said, remembering what took place is a sacred duty. And he also said that being here, hearing the stories, the horrors, is something that he will never forget. And I think that is true. I don't think you can visit Auschwitz and speak to people and learn what happened there and just be there without taking that away with you and remembering it forever. And
he wrote too, didn't he, about children who had their lives taken from them when they'd only really just begun. And that's the other thing that our guide was telling us. And again, everyone knows this from history, or we hope they do, that when all of these Jewish people arrived on trains from as far afield as Hungary and Czechoslovakia and France, and even some from Norway, they were telling us, weren't they? And essentially there was someone deciding, are you good enough to work? Which itself was a terrible, terrible thing to have happened to you, or do we send you straight to the chamber? And a lot of the women and the children were deemed not fit for work.
Yeah, and those, when you're, looking at the shoes that the King was looking at, some of those tiny, tiny little shoes belonging to very, very young children. I mean, it's all just absolutely horrifying. But watching him standing in front of me at that death wall, where he lay a wreath which read, "In special remembrance." It was a personal handwritten message. He went, lay the wreath, took a moment and was sort of looking up and really taking it in. And then he walked away, stopped, turned back again. And in those moments, he did look visibly moved and incredibly emotional, I think. I mean, understandably, how could you not
Yeah,
be?
and he kind of looked back a couple of times,
Yeah.
didn't he? And, you know, the speech that he made earlier when he was at the Jewish Community Centre was about, you know, the horrors, the depths to which humanity had sank, but also, as you said, not just a duty, but a sacred duty to keep remembering, because it will soon fall to other generations for that remembrance to take place.
A moment when we recall the depths to which humanity can sink, when evil is allowed to flourish, ignored for too long by the world.
And that speech was very well received in the room in that JCC in Krakow.
Yeah, he spoke about the importance of cherishing our freedom, challenging prejudice, and never being a bystander in the face of violence and hate, which you know, I think is an incredibly important message. And he said, you know, in a world that remains full of turmoil and strife, there can be no more important message, and something for everybody to sort of take on board, really.
Now, he's not been before to Auschwitz, but Camilla did go for the 75th commemorations. And actually, the late Queen, when she was on her official state visit to Germany, went to Bergen-Belsen. And again, when I was talking to the chief rabbi, he was saying, "Oh, everyone asked me afterwards, what did the Queen say? What did Queen Elizabeth say after it?" And he said, "She didn't say anything, because you can't.
You can't. There isn't
because you are
really,
in that kind of silence. You can't find the words for it. The stunned silence that I spoke about."
Yeah, I think I felt that after I'd been. It was my first time visiting, and being there with the King. I felt it then that there was nothing to say. But then we went back the next day, didn't we, and did the full tour. And again, there's nothing you can really say to sum up what you've seen or what that feels like.
I'd imagine, you tell me, but there was probably a slight difference between when you were there working, you know what you were doing, but it was pretty horrific, but you were kind of in work mode. And then when you go back the next day and you take it in, there is a little bit of a difference there, isn't it?
Yeah.
Because you must have felt the night before, OK, we've got to get this picture out, and it was quite late in the evening, wasn't it? All the BBC Six, our evening news, we all wanted to run the picture, and I'm sure a lot of your focus was on that. But actually, when you go back the next day and take it all in, that's when it really hits you.
Yeah, and I think I felt it was important to go back and fully do the tour and, you know, see it with my own eyes and absorb it properly. Having said that, you know, being there the day before with the King, you know, you get to these, you know, you get there earlier than him, you have a chance to see what he's going to see and take in a little bit of that. And I don't think, you know, there is any way you can go there and not feel moved by it. And even when you're in work mode. Yeah,
quite. Let's talk about William and Kate and what they did, because they were kind of heading up the UK commemoration, because the day that Auschwitz was liberated, 27th of January 1945, is now marked around the world as Holocaust Memorial Day. And the events were happening not just in Poland, but in the UK as well.
Yeah, it's the main commemorations in the UK were at the Guildhall in London, and both the Prince and Princess of Wales attended that. The Princess of Wales was only announced as that she was going. On the Monday. It had been previously announced that William was going.
I kind of would, I mean, if you were to ask me last week, do you think she'll be a late addition to the VIP list, then I probably would have said yes, because if you're going to come back to work only for certain events, which she's still in that category because of her treatment, that was one I would have expected her to attend.
Totally, I think, you know, and she has previously, she's photographed Holocaust survivors with their grandchildren, Stephen Frank and Yvonne Bernstein, who were both at the Guildhall. William and Kate met survivors, including Yvonne and Stephen, and it was a very warm interaction between the princess and both of them. I think she described it as being reunited with an old friend, but she took those photos of them with their grandchildren back in 2020 for the 75th anniversary. But yeah, I think not a surprise that she went. I think an important one for her to be at.
And we were, I think, again, we might have mentioned this in the earlier podcast, that we were with William and Kate when they went to the Stutthof camp, which was also in Poland, 2017, I think it was, wasn't it? And the camp much smaller. That's one thing I kind of, having now been to both of those, Stutthof was awful. There was, yes, a crematorium and a gas chamber, but nothing on the scale of Auschwitz.
The sheer size and scale of Auschwitz is just, it's vast, isn't it?
Yeah.
Absolutely staggering.
Yeah. And the operation, in order to make it happen, from the driving of the trains to the processing of the hair to give it to the textile industry, what are they telling us, that some of the prisoner blocks were built with bricks from demolished Polish houses, and then when they ran out of bricks, they just built them with wood, and it was some days they said it was minus 30 degrees Celsius, and that's how most of these prisoners perished.
Well, we saw the barracks, didn't we, that they lived in, and very, very basic brick buildings, about 700, 800 people in each, sleeping on wooden slats or the floor, just horrific conditions.
There was I took a photo of the one of the information boards, and it was talking about how, just the numbers and just how many of those who were sent there were Jewish. It was 1.1 million Jews were deported to Auschwitz. There was 140,000 Polish, 23,000 Roma, 15,000 Soviet prisoners of war, and 25,000 prisoners from other ethnic groups. But 1.1 million of the 1.3 million were Jewish.
Yeah, so it's just
listen,
horrifying.
Yes, and important to mark it, and we will, hopefully carry on marking it, even if the survivors are no longer with us.
Yeah, I think that's one of the messages that so many people we've spoken to in the last week or so have said to us, is that the importance of those stories continuing and people retelling those stories and ensuring that people never forget what happened, but to ensure that it never happens again.
And talking of never happens again, I spoke to an 89-year-old at that Jewish community centre. She's called Zofia. So she was about 4 at the beginning of the war. So her, her very young childhood years were spent hiding from the Nazis. Interestingly, she said to me, all this talk about learning and learning the lessons of the past, she doesn't think we have. She said, look, we in Poland are much closer to Ukraine. Look what's happening there. Look what's happening in other parts of the world. This is just a short bit of my interview with Zofia, 89 years old. Brilliant English, I thought that she had, and how she thinks perhaps we still should have lessons to learn.
It's absolutely important that all world remember that it happens and it could happen again.
We are always told to learn the lessons of the past. Are you saying we have not learned those lessons?
No, humanity had not.
There is no easy way to move on from that. So, just that important that the King marked it. I think brilliant that he went, and the focus that he brought to that, that moment. And again, he made the speech at the JCC, but actually at the actual commemoration, it wasn't about the world leaders that were there. It was about the.
It was all about the survivors, and no speech or anything from the King, but he did. He lay a candle there, didn't he? Along with survivors and other leaders and dignitaries that had come to attend the event. But yes, the focus was all very much on the survivors, as it should be. And the hashtag for the whole event was to never forget, which I think is very
played
important
a very
and
small
poignant
part in passing that message on to whoever's listening to this. One other thing to mention this week, then, and. Completely and utterly different kind of news, but a royal baby.
We have a royal baby. Princess Beatrice and her husband Edo have had a baby girl, Athena. She was born on Wednesday, the 22nd of January, and weighing 4 pounds and 5 ounces. Which
isn't very big, is it?
She's very. She was several weeks premature because she was due in the early spring. But do you remember back in December, we were told that she was going to attend Sandringham for Christmas because she'd received medical advice not to travel long
get to see the
distances.
relatives. Yeah.
So, but
So
all,
this is I'm no good on baby names, and her older sister is Sienna.
Yeah.
And there's also a stepson,
So,
which is Edo's.
yeah, Beatrice
son.
and Edo have Sienna and Athena, and Wolfie is Beatrice's stepson.
Just the full name of Athena, there's an Elizabeth in there, isn't there, I think?
Wow, what a good name.
Yeah, so, but now, in terms of line to the throne, we worked it out as 11th, because 10th is Sienna, 9th is Beatrice, 8th is Prince Andrew. So
Yeah.
I think that's about right. So the
about
new
right.
baby is 11th in line to the throne.
And there's a picture that we can
Which
show
pushes
you
everyone else down.
of-
I always think this was successful. Like bumps down Princess Anne and bumps down Edward and Sophie and bumps down Eugenie and her kids. So
Yeah, her kids.
Kids.
No, kids.
Oh, there's 2.
Kids.
See.
August and Ernest.
Oh yes, that's right. August. Okay, so here we go. We're talking about the York
gosh.
children. August, Ernest, Eugenie's, and then Wolfie.
Sienna and Athena.
I was trying to do that myself.
I know, but we're running out of time. We're running out of time. But no, all well. And
Okay.
there was a picture put up today
Right.
of the new baby. So all well and lovely news. And everyone is said to be delighted. How could they not be? It's lovely
Yes,
news.
it's the King's great niece. Would this be?
Oh, yes.
Yeah. There we go. Congratulations to them. Lizzie, thank you very much indeed. A sombre podcast this week, but a necessary one, of course, given where we've just been, where the King has just been as well. You'll know that Talking Royals podcasts are available wherever you get your podcasts from, whichever platform you choose. And you can always go back and listen to previous episodes. In fact, if you want to go back and listen to the Christmas quiz again, I strongly recommend it. Otherwise, we will update you again next week. In the meantime, thanks for being with us.